The Body Artist, Chapter 3. She looked at him. "Tell me, you've been here how long?" He didn't raise his head. There was something so strange about him that she heard her words hang in the room, predictable and trite. She felt no fear. He had a foundling quality, lost and found. And she was, she guessed, the finder. "You have been here," she said, speaking clearly, pausing between words. He looked at her and seemed older now. The scant act of head-raising, a simple tilt of chin and eyes that was minutely crucial to his transformation. Older and faintly moist, a sheen across his forehead and cheeks. He said something. She said, "What?" His underwear consisted of white trunks and a t-shirt that was too big, and she studied him up and down, openly, everywhere. "It is not able," he said. "But why are you here? And have you been here for long?" He dropped his head and appeared to think about these matters, as if working out the details of a complicated problem. They stood outside the house, near the top of the sloped field, and watched a lobster boat pumping through the white caps. She'd fed him leftover soup and some bread, some toast. You had to flip the thing twice to get the bread to toast properly. "What do you see?" she said, gesturing toward the boat and the advancing cloud line. "The trees are some of them," he said. "Bending, swaying in the wind. Those are birches. The white ones, those are called paper birches. The white ones. But beyond the trees. Out there," she said. He looked a while. "It rained very much." "It will rain. It is going to rain," she said. He wore a windbreaker and a pair of work pants and seemed unhappy out here. She tried not to press him for information. She found the distance interesting, the halting quality of his speech and actions, the self-talk quality, his seeming unconcern about what would happen to him now. Not apathy or indifference, she thought, but his limited ability to consider the implications. She wasn't sure what it meant to him, being found in someone else's house. The wind came harder now, and they turned away from it. She amused herself by thinking he'd come from cyberspace, a man who emerged from her computer screen in the dead of night. He was from Kotka in Finland. She said, "It did not rain. It will rain." He moved uneasily in space, indoors or out, as if the air had bends and warps. She watched him sidle into the house, walking with a slight shuffle. He feared levitation, maybe. She could not stop watching him. It was always as if he did this or that, as if. She needed a reference elsewhere to get him placed. They sat in the grim, paneled room under prints of sailing ships. The phone was ringing. He looked at the charred logs collapsed in the fireplace, last night's fire, and she watched him. The books on the low shelves were mostly summer reading you find in rented houses. books suited to the role with faded jacket illustrations of other houses and other summers, or almanacs or atlases, a sun stripe edging the tops of the taller books. His chin was sunken back, severely receded, giving his face an unfinished look, and his hair was wiry and snagged with jutting clumps. She had to concentrate to note these features. She looked at him and had to look again. There was something elusive in his aspect, moment to moment, a thinness of physical address. She whispered, "Talk to me." He sat with his legs awkwardly crossed, one trouser leg riding up his calf, and she could see that he'd knotted a length of string around the top of his sock to keep it from sagging. It made her think of someone. "Talk to me, I am talking," he said. She thought she understood what he meant by this. There was a certain futility in his tone, an endlessness of effort, suggesting things he could not easily make clear to her, no matter how much he said. Even his gestures seemed marked by struggle. She knew she would have to call hospitals, clinics, psychiatric facilities to ask about a missing patient. The rain hit the windows in taps and spatters, small and countable. And then it was everywhere, banging the roof of the sun porch and filling the downspouts, and they sat and listened to it. She said, "What's your name?" He looked at her. She said, "I came here to be by myself. This is important to me. I am willing to wait. I will give you a chance to tell me who you are, but I don't want someone in my house. I will give you a chance," she said, "but I will not wait indefinitely." She didn't want it to sound like a formal warning, but it probably did. She would have to call the nearest mission for the homeless, which wouldn't be near at all, or maybe the church in town, and the church with the missing steeple on Little Moon, and she would have to call the police, finally, if nothing else worked. "I am here because of Ray, who was my husband, who is dead. I don't know why I'm telling you this, because it is surely unnecessary, but I need to live here alone for a time. Just tell me if you understand." He moved his hand in a manner that seemed to mean she didn't have to say anything further. Of course he understood, but maybe not. The storm rolled in, and they sat and listened. The rain was so total, they had to listen to it. She could call the real estate agent and make a complaint about a person on the premises. That was another thing she could do. It was only mid-morning, but she had the feeling he'd been here a week. They sat and looked at last night's fire. Then she realized who it was, the man he made her think of. It was a science teacher in high school, semi-bumbling, who looked pale-haired in uncertain light and bald on brighter days, and who scotch-taped a split seam in his loafers once and spoke in unmeasured hesitations that made the students feel embarrassed on his behalf, the few sensitive ones, or openly restless, the restless, which was everybody else. She named the visitor in his honor, Mr. Tuttle. She thought it would make him easier to see. She whispered, Tell me something. He uncrossed his legs and sat with a hand on each knee, a dummy in a red club chair, his head turned toward her. I know how much, he said. I know how much this house, alone by the sea. He looked not pleased exactly, but otherwise satisfied, technically satisfied to have managed the last cluster of words. And it was, in fact, coming from Mr. Tuttle, a formulation she heard in its echoing depths. 4 words only. But he'd placed her in a set of counter surroundings, of simultaneous insides and outsides, the house, the sea planet outside it, and how the word alone referred to her and to the house, and how the word sea reinforced the idea of solitude, but suggested a vigorous release as well, a means of escape from the book-walled limits of the self. She knew it was foolish to examine so closely. She was making things up. But this was the effect he had, shadow inching through a sentence, showing a word in its facets and aspects, words like moons in particular phases. She said, I like the house. Yes, I want to be here. But it's only a rental. I am renting. I will be out of here in 6 or 7 weeks, less maybe. It's a house we rented. 5 or 6 weeks, less, she said. She wasn't watching him now. She was looking at the backs of her hands, fingers stretched, looking and thinking, recalling moments with Ray. Not moments exactly, but times, or moments flowing into composite time, an erotic of sea and touch. And she curled one hand over and into the other, missing him in her body and feeling sexually and abysmally alone, and staring at the points where her knuckles shone bloodless from the pressure of her grip. He said, But you did not leave? She looked at him. I will leave in a few weeks, when it's time, she said. When the lease is up, or earlier, I will leave. But you do not, he said. This shift from past tense to present had the sound of something overcome, an obstacle or restriction. He had to extend himself to get it out, and she heard something in his voice. She didn't know what it was, but it made her get up and go to the window. She stood there, looking at the rain. She thought he might belong in one of the trailer homes, scattered at the edge of the woods outside town, near but wholly remote, with cars on blocks and a wacko dog convoluted in the dirt and leaves, trying to scratch an itch somewhere. And he is the grown son, who has always been this way, inaccessible, ever dependent, living matter of fact in an oblong box with his drained and aging parents who never use each other's name. And he wanders off for days sometimes and goes wherever he goes, muttering and unharmed, into the bubble world. Maybe not, she thought. That's not what she'd heard in his voice. There was something at the edge, unconnected to income levels or verb tenses or what his parents watch on TV. She turned from the window and got him to talk a little. He seemed agreeable to the idea of talking. He talked about objects in the room, stumblingly, and she wondered what he saw, or failed to see, or saw so differently she could never begin to conjure its outlines. He talked. After a while, she began to understand what she was hearing. It took many levels of perception. It took whole social histories of how people listen to what other people say. There was a peculiarity in his voice, a trait developing even as he spoke, that she was able to follow to its source. She watched him. He was the same hapless man she'd come upon earlier, without a visible sense of the effect he was having. It wasn't outright impersonation, but she heard elements of her voice, the clipped delivery, the slight buzz deep in the throat, her pitch, her sound, and how difficult at first, unearthly almost, to detect her own voice coming from someone else, from him, and then how deeply disturbing. She wasn't sure it was her voice. Then she was. By this time, he wasn't talking about chairs, lamps, or patterns in the carpet. He seemed to be assuming her part in a conversation with someone. She tried to understand what she was hearing. He gestured as he spoke, moving his hand to the words, and she began to realize she'd said these things to Ray here in the house, or things similar. They were routine remarks about a call she'd had from friends who wanted to visit. She remembered. She recalled dimly that she'd been standing at the foot of the stairs and that he'd been on the second floor, Ray had, walking up and down the hall, doing script work. She stood by the window now. The voice began to waver and fade, but his hand remained in motion, marking the feeble beat. She grabbed a coat from the rack and went out in the rain. She draped the coat over her bent arm, which she held above her, and walked across the grass to the dirt driveway where the car was parked. The door was unlocked, and she got in and sat there because why would you lock the door in a place so isolated? Rain washed down the windshield in overlapping tides. She sat there in a brief fit of shivering, and it was hard to stop hearing the sound of that voice. One of the rear windows was lowered an inch, and the smell of wet meadow, the fragrance of country rain, the effects of sea and breeze and memory all mixed in the air. But she kept hearing the voice and seeing the hand gesture, unmistakably Ray's, 2 fingers joined and wagging. She didn't know how long she was there. Maybe a long time. The rain beat hard on the roof and hood. How much time is a long time? Could be this, could be that. Finally, she pushed open the door and walked back to the house, holding the coat aloft.